All right, welcome to all, and thank you for coming to the Minnesota Senate Districts 20 and 58 Candidate Forum. My name is Melanie Fries, and I am the Voter Education Chair of the Voter Services Committee of the League of Women Voters of Northfield and Cannon Falls. We will start the candidate forum in a couple of minutes, but before we do, I would like to review some of the forum policies and rules. This candidate forum is free and open to the public. Because of the ongoing pandemic, the 2020 forums are being held online using a Zoom webinar that can host over 1,000 participants. While the audience can watch the forum in real time, audience members' audio and video will be muted throughout the entire forum. Chat functions will not be available. It is the League's policy to tape the entire candidate forum without editing so that citizens will see the event in its entirety and not just selected scenes or sound bites. This forum is being recorded and will be available online at lwvnorthfieldmn.org tomorrow. We will be asking questions that were submitted in advance, but audience members are also encouraged to submit questions throughout the forum via email at contact us at lwvnorthfieldmn.org. You may address the question to one candidate, but all other candidates will be given the opportunity to respond as well. Questions that are unclear, hostile, or of a personal nature will not be asked. Those that fall into the same general topic area may be consolidated to allow us to cover as many topics as possible in the allotted time. All questions submitted are the property of the League of Women Voters of Northfield and Cannon Falls. While all candidates were invited to participate in the forum today, Jason Hoche and Zach Duckworth did not respond to the multiple mail, email, and phone invitations and will not be in attendance today. The League's policy is to allow candidate forums to proceed if at least one candidate is present. I would now like to turn the time over to Pat Johnson, co-president of the League of Women Voters of Northfield and Cannon Falls, for some opening remarks.
Good morning. I'm Pat Johnson. I'm co-president of the League of Women Voters of Northfield and Cannon Falls, and I'd like to welcome you to the Minnesota Senate Districts 20 and 58 Candidate Forum. The 2020 Candidate Forums are hosted by the League of Women Voters of Northfield and Cannon Falls and co-sponsored by the Academic Civic Engagement Office at St. Olaf College, Center for Community and Civic Engagement at Carleton College, and the Northfield Area Chamber of Commerce. We thank the candidates for attending today and our internet audience for viewing. This forum is a public service providing you with an opportunity to hear the candidates discuss important issues face to face. The views expressed here today are those of the candidates and not the sponsoring organizations. The League of Women Voters Minnesota, a nonpartisan 501c3 political organization, encourages informed and active participation of citizens in government and influences public policy through education and advocacy. We do not endorse candidates for office or political parties. If you're interested in learning more about the history of the League and our local league, we encourage you to go and visit the exhibit about the League, which is at the Northfield Historical Society through tomorrow, Sunday, September 27th. Unfortunately, there is never enough time to cover all the issues raised. If you feel that your question was not addressed, please contact the candidate directly after the forum. And now I'd like to introduce our moderator, Mary Carlson, a certified moderator from the League of Women Voters.
Thank you, Melanie and Pat. I'm Mary Carlson. I've been a longtime member of the League, and I'm happy to be a trained moderator. It's one thing I think I can do. So I will do my level best to make sure this forum goes smoothly in these very strange times during which we live. We have a process for asking the questions, and I think it'll go just fine. I have encouraged our candidates today to refer to me as Mary, and feel free to unmute if you're confused about anything. I've also asked permission of the candidates to use their first names. So they have each given me permission to do that while also respecting their positions and their willingness to run for office. And I give you our heartfelt gratitude. So we'll start the forum with the opening statements. Each candidate will be given 2 minutes for their opening statement and 1 minute for a closing statement. Opening statements will be in alphabetical order. That is, Mr. Rich Draheim first from Senate District 20, then Mr. Matt Little from Senate District 58, and then Mr. John Olson, also from Minnesota Senate District 20. The closing statements will be in a random order. The order of answering questions will also be rotated. Candidates have 1 minute and 30 seconds to respond to each question. Please note our wonderful timekeepers, volunteers from St. Olaf. They have a 30-second sign. Thanks, folks. A 15-second sign and a stop sign, which if you'd ignore, I'll then reiterate. So thank you very much. You can each see them, candidates, thumbs up. All right, appreciated that. We hope that most, if not all of the questions will be submitted by the audience. Please submit questions during the forum to you can see it on my name, contact us at lwwnorthfield.org, I apologize. We also have some advanced questions submitted by email to the League of Women Voters of Northfield and Cannon Falls. So let us begin with opening statements.
All right, may I interrupt really quickly?
You may.
That's supposed to be LWV at northfieldmn.org, the email address.
Don't mind me. Hold on,
This is
Mr.
wonderful.
Draheim. Yep, I'm going to make it absolutely accurate. Thank you so much. Excellent. Yeah. Okay. Mr. Draheim, please, your opening statement.
Thank you. I'm Rich Draheim. I live in Washington Township actually on Lake Washington in Le Sueur County. I've lived there for 24 years with my wife, Lynette, and we have 2 children, David, age 12, and Lily, age 16. They attend Cleveland Public Schools. I'm a small business owner and first-time candidate 4 years ago. So I understand the challenges that John's going through on running his campaign and all the postcards we get for and against all the candidates. So I feel your pain, John, and we both have come out and denounced the negative campaigning, which I think is important. During my 4 years as a senator for District 20, fortunate enough to serve as the Vice Chair of Higher Education, serve on the Agriculture, Rural Development and Housing Committee, the Health and Human Service Committee, Jobs and Economic Growth Committee, Governor Dayton's Housing Task Force, the Blue Ribbon Panel for Health and Human Service, the Deed Innovation Work Group. I chaired a subcommittee on housing, and what we looked at on that subcommittee was the pathway to home ownership to really get people out of poverty. And then Legislative Water Commission, served as a board of directors for the ERI group, which is the Agriculture Utilization Research Institute, and various other committees during my time. But thank you very much for having me today.
Thank you. And then Mr. Matt Little, please.
Well, first I want to thank the League of Women Voters for putting this forum on and making it work during COVID. It's amazing. My name is Matt Little. I'm your state senator, used to be the mayor of Lakeville. Since it's kind of unusual times, we thought we'd open kind of unusually. If you could see in the background, my wife and daughter were in the background, so they're just going to say hi quickly. That's Coco and Poppy. And that's my family. And we also have 3 dogs, but we could not trust them to be anywhere near a Zoom meeting. So I like to tell this story about Poppy because it's a memory I'll never forget. And I think any parent out there knows what I'm talking about. I remember the first time Poppy fell asleep on my shoulder. I'll never forget it. Because in that moment, that was just the greatest thing that's ever happened to me. And I remember thinking to myself, I need to quit politics. I need to get out of politics because this is just so amazing. But in the same moment, I thought to myself that politics is probably more important than ever now. Because look at what is happening around us. Look at how we're treating each other. I think just look at the campaign that's being run against us. Just endless amounts of ads that are lying about my record, claiming I want to defund or dismantle the police. None of that's true. I do not support defunding or dismantling the police. I've supported law enforcement my entire career. And so I agree with Rich that this district deserves way better than those lies. So that's why we've committed to a clean campaign that has 3 parts. The first is that I won't say anything false or misleading about my opponent. The second is I won't let anybody on my campaign do so. And the third is I've called on my party and any PAC supporting me to do the same. And I have denounced my own party for lies they sent out about my opponent. This is important to me because the way we campaign is a reflection of how we're governed. So I choose to campaign with the truth and with integrity. Thank you.
Thank you, Matt. And Mr. John Olson, your opening statement.
Thank you, Mary. And I thank the League of Women Voters for holding this today. This is a great opportunity for us as candidates to actually talk about the issues and what we view are important solutions to these challenges that we face together. My wife, Melissa, and I moved into Cedar Lake Township back in 2012. That was after I retired from a 21-year career in the Navy, including 4 years before that at the U.S. Naval Academy in Annapolis. Came back home to Minnesota, really missed being here in the state, and frankly, came back home primarily for family reasons. Since that time, I've been doing teaching at Metropolitan State University in the School of Law Enforcement and Criminal Justice, and over at Carleton College in the Political Science Department, teaching courses on national security at both. I decided to run because I was growing more and more concerned about this hyper-partisan divide that we see in our state. I spent 25 years, like I said, on active duty in the Navy. I understand what happens when societies tear themselves apart. I was called upon to serve in some of those places around the world, and it is terrifying to me that we would potentially allow ourselves to go down that path. I refuse to let that happen on my watch. I'm interviewing right now to be hired by the people of Senate District 20 to represent them up in St. Paul. And I don't care what your political stripe is, Republican, Democrat, Independent. I don't care if you're a farmer or a lawyer or a nurse or a school teacher. None of those things matter. We have shared challenges that we face in this state. We have serious problems that we have to address. And it's going to take people who are willing to, roll up our sleeves, sit down, address the root causes of these issues, and find meaningful, long-term bipartisan solutions. My entire career in the Navy was spent solving problems. And that's what I'm intending to do up in St. Paul, is solve problems and put Minnesota on a great path forward. Thank you for the opportunity to talk to you today.
Thank you so much, John. Now we'll proceed to ask the questions that have been submitted. I will tell you before I ask the question, the order in which we'll have the answers. And please, if you forget the question, I'm happy to repeat them. I won't always repeat everyone each time for the sake of time, but I'm really happy to do it. So for this first question, we will start with John, go to Rich, and then to Matt. I apologize. We have to do this right. We will start with John. We will go to Matt. Then we will go to Rich for question number 1. And that is, what do you feel is the most pressing issue facing your Senate district now? And if elected, what will you do to address this issue? So we'll start with John.
So that's a great question. We're going to run into these technical challenges here. It's okay. So I would say I started running back in October, and I've been in listening mode from the very beginning of this race. And the top issues that I've heard in Senate District 20 are healthcare, concerns about the farm economy, where we're at on education, and frankly, something that's become a critical enabler for all 3 of those areas, and that's a high-speed broadband internet access. I suspect we'll probably talk a little bit about all 3 of those issues in more detail later. Obviously, though, over the last 6 months, COVID-19 has really hammered away at Minnesota's economy and the economy across the entire country. So COVID-19 and the economic challenges we face right now, they're clearly on the front burner. I would tell you that there are basically three groups that have been impacted by that. Professionals, salary earners who have been able to work from home, they typically have access to high-speed broadband. They've been relatively unimpacted by this. We had skilled labor who was initially put off the job because of COVID-19. And then we had frontline workers, and frontline workers are still suffering today, as are small businesses, and there's been serious impacts to the farmers as well. So I think we need to address keeping those people afloat in that third group, and then we need to get funding out there to greater Minnesota through local government aid. That's where I see happening right now. We got to keep the small businesses, frontline workers and farmers afloat, and we need to make sure that long-term our cities are viable.
Thank you. Matt?
Thank you, Mary. I think at the top of the mind for people here in this district is what's going to happen with COVID. When do we get to have a chance to get back to some sense of normal? And so my approach has been to try and find a metrics-based approach in order to say, if we meet a certain metric, if we fall under a certain amount of hospitalizations or cases, then a lot of the remaining closures could be ended. But people in my district are also concerned about police reform and how we can do police reform while continuing to support law enforcement. So I think we need to continue to look at reforms in terms of making sure we have body cameras out everywhere, wellness training, as well as some tiered calls, getting those structures in place. Lastly, I think, the economy, which ties back into COVID, is very important. People are worried about where our economy is going, whether they're going to have a job. I think a perfect starting place for us is to pass a bonding bill that's over 20,000 jobs here in Minnesota. It's much needed infrastructure. It helps small town Minnesota survive and thrive. So those things are incredibly important. Then lastly, top of the mind always is the high cost of healthcare. I think people should be able to buy into Minnesota Care. I think we need a drug price review board that can lower these high and irrational drug costs as well.
Thank you. Rich, remember the question? Most pressing? Okay, thank you.
Thank you. To me, it's the cost of care, and that's one of my top priorities that I've worked on since I've been elected. Been very fortunate to get quite a few bills through on health care, including what I thought was the first step was understanding the cost of care. What do things cost? We've been fortunate to slow down or stop the drastic increase in healthcare insurance. We passed reinsurance to help keep those costs down. But the cost of care is, I think, the number one issue facing our district. Once we get through this COVID issue, and that bleeds into not just health insurance and the care of people, but the long-term care. So nursing homes, we really have to look at why nursing homes cost so much. I talked to a lady yesterday that her mom was in a nursing home, and it was $10,000 a month for the care for her mom, and that's destroying families. And we really have to take a better look at that. We've done a lot work in the long-term care facility, but we really haven't looked at the cost of it. So I'm hoping we'll be able to do that in the next 2-year term. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, we'll go to the second question. We'll answer in this order, please. Matt, then Rich, then John. This question is, what is your evaluation of the state's response to the coronavirus pandemic thus far?
Well, I think the proof is in the numbers. If you see some of our surrounding states and you see what's happening in some of the southern states, you can see that Minnesota is just doing much better. I think our response was swifter before it became a problem. But I also think it's included a good deal of balance. You can see what's happening with kind of the more regional approach in opening schools, and opening any industry we can get open safely. I think this balanced approach has really been good and has served Minnesota well. But again, looking into the future, I think people and businesses want a horizon as to when the regulations, the additional COVID regulations are over or no longer necessary. So I think we still have some work at the Capitol to figure out what metric we can use to determine when we're done, right? When our response is done or no longer necessary. So my feeling is we should use hospitalizations because that's a very clear number. So if we go below a certain level of hospitalizations for COVID, then the regulations and closures for COVID would be over. So we've got a lot of work to do there. But overall, I think our response has been good, and that's proven in the numbers.
Thank you, Rich.
Thank you. You know, I guess my first response would be good and bad. I think when we look at the majority of the deaths in the long-term care facilities, I don't think that was handled correctly. I think we could have done a better job there, and I think most of our focus should have been on our most vulnerable, which for this virus, it's our long-term care. But I agree with Matt. You know, we should have some metrics, and that's something we asked for right away from the governor's office on what are the cutoffs, what are going to trigger new behaviors from a state standpoint. But I think, like anything, this is a great learning lesson that we should take what worked, what didn't work from this last year, and make the appropriate changes on the state level that we can do. And you know, for me being a legislator, one of 201 elected officials across the state, along with Matt, you know, we're not included in a lot of the discussion and the decision making, and I think that needs to change because we all represent different areas who have different needs. Thank you.
Thanks, John.
Want me to go ahead? Okay. So I would say that I have always lived my life in sort of a science-based, fact-based decision matrix. And what I've seen out of the governor, he's provided clear, decisive leadership. He's made the best decisions he can make based on the science out there and the advice of his public health experts. I would tell you 3 years ago when I taught a course on called Studies in Weapons of Mass Destruction at Carleton College, we were lucky enough to get a guy named Michael Osterholm down to our class to talk about biological threats. And even at that time, he said, look, it's not a question of if, it's a question of when we're going to be faced with some serious pandemic. And just 3 years later, we were hit with COVID-19. This has been a virus that nations all around the world have been struggling to deal with. Here in the United States, we have over 200,000 dead. We're about to approach 2,000 dead just here in Minnesota. And we've been very careful across the state. People are very responsible here in Minnesota, and yet we still are facing some serious challenges. Like Matt and Rich, I agree that, and I think there aren't any Democrats out there that would disagree. We want to open the economy back up, but we have to do it in a very thoughtful, rational way. If we just, open up everything all at once, we're going to have an explosion of cases. And just yesterday alone, we've already been downgraded to the point where our numbers of COVID positivity rates are climbing. I think a good metric, frankly, like Matt talked about, was hospitalization rates to determine how we go forward.
Okay, thank you. For the next question, we'll start with you, John. We'll move to Matt and then to Rich. Okay, this question is, what should be Minnesota's top spending priorities in the next biennium?
That is a great question. We are facing a massive deficit, probably the worst in Minnesota history. And I would tell you that a responsible leader has to admit that literally everything has to be on the table as we look at the state budget going forward. I think we have a moral responsibility to make sure that we protect critical services that are out there for the most vulnerable of Minnesotans. And I guarantee you that if we look very hard, we can find greater efficiencies in all departments in the state government. And I'm happy to look at those options. I would tell you that I've been a long believer in the fact that education is really the most important strategic investment we can make in the future of our state. It is a big part of our budget. It needs to continue to be a huge part of our budget because we need to set the conditions now going forward. That strategic investment is 25 years into the future, right? When a kid starting kindergarten today reaches the age of 30 and has started their career, we'll know whether or not we were successful. I think we need to look long and hard at creative revenue generation without killing our economic development potential going forward. If you think about the fact we had this rainy day fund, thank goodness we did. I don't know where we would be if we had not had that in place at this point. And like I said before, we need to push forward local government aid out to cities all across Minnesota. They are really struggling right now, and that needs to be a priority funding effort.
Okay, thank you. Matt.
Thanks, Mary. The projected deficit is real and it's structural, and it's going to require some cuts. And while we're making those tough choices, we do need to protect the most vulnerable. So I think we need to be protecting day programs. We need to be protecting special education generally, healthcare services, and also public safety. Those are the things that I will be prioritizing while we're making those difficult choices. And it's going to be choices none of us are going to want to, drive to St. Paul and make. But I would also say we have a couple options to get this economy moving again. I think and reduce the level of the deficit slightly. The first thing, again, to go back to it, is the bonding bill. That is immediate jobs, over 20,000 jobs, and it's projects around the state that will spur additional investment and additional jobs. So let's do that. That is just a no-brainer. The second thing is, we should explore additional revenue sources. One thing on my list is legalized sports gambling. It's something that people are doing in neighboring states and online, and it's just Minnesota's losing the revenue. So we do need to get creative about those revenue sources. But again, this is a real and structural deficit that's going to require some hard choices, but you want to elect people that are going to protect the most vulnerable.
Thanks, Rich.
Okay, thank you. To me, the top priority is getting the economy back growing. We had the best economy probably in 50 years, pre-COVID, record low unemployment. But kind of what I think a lot of people don't understand is what's coming yet, and that's the rising cost of the health and human service sector of our budget. It's projected by 2026, that's going to double. Okay, right now, we spend approximately 40% of our budget on K-12, very important, like I said before, but we spend about 30% on our health and human service sector. Well, if that's going to double in 6 years, almost 5 years, we have to start planning for that and prioritizing our health and human service. And that kind of goes to making sure that we're spending our money appropriately and the right people that qualify are getting those assistance and use of those programs. So I hope that when we look at the next year's budget, we look long-term and not just short-term. Broadband is so important. I've carried various bills on broadband and including the budget bills, the funding for them. And we have to hurry up on that. We can't allow our kids not to have internet and expect them to have distance learning.
Thank you very much. Each of you has referenced this, so I'm going to insert a question about you in your public service role. This one will start with Rich, we'll go to John, and then to Matt, please. What process of decision-making do you use when you have to make these hard decisions?
Thank you. Thank you for the question, Mary. I'm a small business owner, so I have a couple small businesses, and when you're a small business owner, you're faced with decisions all the time, and you gather the facts. You try to inquire to people in the know, in whatever topic that is. In this case for politics, associations or people in the industry, you talk to them, you confirm that there is an issue that we need to try to solve, and then you brainstorm on ideas, and you throw it out there and see what happens. And sometimes, like Matt's insulin bill that he brought up a good issue, and it's hard when your final version isn't what you had thought was the plan in the beginning, but at least the problem got addressed, and hopefully we moved a couple steps in the right direction. So that's kind of how I approach problems, and we try to gather the information from various sources, people in the district, make a decision, get a bill drafted, and then take input from both sides of the aisle. Most of my bills are bipartisan. We got to work together, and so that's my thank you.
Thank you. And John?
So I was a career intelligence officer in the U.S. Navy, and I understand the value of collecting every bit of data you can find as fast as possible, typically, if you have to make a decision in a crisis. We do those things, we are trained to do those things because what we're trying to do is create an understanding of what proximate reality is. None of us know everything, but we can learn an awful lot about an issue and get incredibly smart on an issue through that process of collecting information and talking to experts, et cetera. And by doing so, you reduce risk, right? You reduce risk, and that's kind of the critical element of decision making. We're going to make some very difficult decisions at the state capitol starting in January, and my decision making process will include hearing from all stakeholders over issues. I want to have an open and fair discussion in committee hearings. And once we think we've come to a consensus, because that's what legislation should be about, is building consensus towards solving these very difficult challenges we face. Once we reach that consensus, then we move forward and bring it onto the floor and hopefully get a bill passed and get that bill passed over on the House side too, so the governor can sign it into law. We share these challenges together, and we need to find these solutions together.
Thank you. And Matt?
Thank you again, Mary. My decision making is largely centered around the principle that I fight for the underdog. There are forces at the Capitol that just do not care about you. They don't. That's why I took on the battle with insulin. These prices are completely irrational. They've been raised 1,000%. It costs $3 to $6 to make a vial, and they're charging $350 per vial. It's just absolutely immoral and wrong. And these, in my work in insulin, as a result, these are the same people funding the attack ads against me. So I will always fight for the person that doesn't have as much power at the Capitol. That's also why I took on Metro Mobility, getting that service to my hometown in Lakeville. People with disabilities and seniors were not able to get around independently, and they don't have the political power to fight for that. So it took me 6 years to get it, but I got it. And now that service is up and running, and people can remain independent and remain in their household. And lastly, I'm fighting for Randolph. Randolph is a town in my district that needs a wastewater sewage treatment system, some basic infrastructure, and I'm fighting for them. And that's how I make my decisions, is I look at who needs the help, who needs me to fight for them, and who isn't fighting for them. And then I just go for it. And I don't care how long it takes. I'm going to get it done.
Okay, thank you very much. For the next question, Matt, we'll start with you. We'll go to Rich and then to John. This question, as somebody has hinted at already, is what would you do or have you done to reduce the hyperpartisanship in our legislature and build a spirit of compromise and collaboration to get things done? Actual steps.
I think there needs to be some context for what the last 4 years of my life looked like. The day I was elected in 2016, the Republicans deemed me their top target. So they had no incentive to give me hearings, and they didn't for a long time. I finally got 2 this year. They had no incentive to pass my bills. In fact, sometimes they would vote my bills down and then have one of their members take them next year and pass them that way. So my situation, I have every reason not to be bipartisan, but I am anyways, despite it all. A lot of my bills are bipartisan. Like Rich said, that insulin bill that ended up passing the floor wasn't my version. I had to hop off the bill to get it passed, but I got it passed, and that's still bipartisan. So bipartisanship is not what most people think it is, which is like this flowery, nice, sparkly word. Bipartisanship is the toughest thing you can do at the Capitol, because you have to have these tough arguments. You have to battle it out, and then you got to find that common ground. And sometimes you just got to move on and work on something else. So bipartisanship is not easy. It's the toughest thing you can do, because at the same time you are disagreeing with each other or campaigning against each other, you still have to get it done for Minnesotans. So if you're going to be bipartisan, you've got to be tough. You got to show up. You got to tell people where you're at. There's no one more bipartisan at the Capitol than me.
Thank you, Mary. Thank you, Matt. You know, I guess coming in, I was probably a little naive, and I think probably Matt was too, thinking that we'd come up with a bill and we'd get a hearing. One of the senators that sits behind me, Carrie Rood, was there 8 years before I got elected. She never had a hearing. Never in 8 years. So I think it works both ways, and that's something we all have to agree to work with. I think whoever's in power sometimes stymies the other party, and that doesn't help the people in Minnesota. And I think we have to remember government is there to serve the people. And I think that's forgotten a lot. But, you know, as far as me personally, I had 139 chief author bills this last session. 139, second most of anybody. 100 of them were bipartisan. There would have been more, but COVID came, and it was really hard to get your last bill signed from the other party because there wasn't everybody up there. 28 of 32 DFL senators signed on to one of my bills. 28 of 32. 32 of 34 GOP senators signed on to one of my bills. And overall, there was 6 senators that I did not have a bill with or try to work with. So I think I have the record to show that I am working across the aisle, because that's how you get things done. So thank you.
Thank you, John.
So I'm an outsider looking in right now. That'll change after November 3rd. The goal here, I think, is to reestablish trust. We've lost trust in one another in many ways. I think there are a lot of people up at the state capitol who talk about, you know, willingness to work on a bipartisan way, but the proof is in the pudding. And when things are put forward for an opportunity to succeed and they're crushed by leadership because there's an opportunity to gain political advantage, that is a failure. That is a failure on part of both parties, frankly. And if we're going to fix these serious challenges that we have in Minnesota today, that has to be, we have to hold our leadership accountable on both sides of the aisle and in both houses to be focused on solving these challenges we face in a bipartisan way. I think everybody that is running for office honestly wants to solve these issues. We have different ideas on policy, but that doesn't mean we don't share a lot of principles and common values. And that's, Minnesota used to be able to come together and solve these issues. When I was a kid growing up, every single one of us would refer to ourselves as a fiscal conservative and a social liberal at the same time. And nowadays that would be like anathema. Oh, you can't be, you have to be one or the other. Well, that's nonsense. We have to be both. We have to be both. We have to be very thoughtful about how we spend our resources, and we have to be very thoughtful about how we put Minnesota on a path to success. So bipartisanship is about reestablishing trust in the future.
Thank you, John. You are all three being very concise, and I appreciate it immensely. It makes my job very, very easy. So the next question, John, you will go first, then Matt, then Rich. Thank you. Healthcare has come up from your opening statements and all the way through. This question is, what is the role of the state in providing or seeing that it is provided accessible and affordable health care for the residents of Minnesota?
So that's a great question. And frankly, healthcare, when I was going around the district, healthcare is hands down the top issue. And why is that? Well, clearly because our healthcare system is not working the way it's designed today. I've talked to farmers who've literally said, we quit paying health insurance because it was a decision between paying health insurance premiums or paying our mortgage, and we had to choose between the two, and clearly we had to continue to live in our homes. Health insurance has been tied to employment basically since the end of World War II, and COVID-19, it really kind of laid bare the fact that that's a structural failure in how we run our health insurance or our healthcare system today. I would suggest to you that for me personally, I strongly support a patient-centered, high-quality, affordable healthcare system that covers everybody. And when I talk about affordable healthcare, I mean all aspects of healthcare: standard care that you would get, addiction counseling, dental care, mental health, eye care, prescription drugs. If it's linked to your health, it should be covered in whatever kind of a new system we might design. I would tell you that I think we ought to bring together stakeholders from across the entire healthcare industry. I think most people care deeply about providing care to people, regardless of what their socioeconomic status is. And we can find a good way ahead if we build that into the system. I think any new system that we create, it has to address the cost drivers of healthcare, has to address the social determinants of healthcare, and it has to deliver equity to everybody in our state.
Thank you, Matt.
I think the central role of government overall is to protect its citizens, and that includes healthcare. I don't think any Minnesotan would ever think of leaving someone without healthcare, no matter their means. I've never met a Minnesotan that said just let someone go. And so I think we here in Minnesota have a strong moral belief in providing healthcare to everyone in the state. That's why I support the Minnesota Care buy-in. I think taxpayers are already paying into it. The premiums are about 28% cheaper. And a lot of the rural areas, it would provide an additional insurance option where there are very few. I think the competition between Minnesota Care and the private insurance companies would also be a benefit in driving down actual healthcare costs. Now, people would still pay a premium, and it's only a choice. It's not mandated. You get to make that choice, but it would be another option. I also think we need a review board here in Minnesota that can review the increases in pharmaceutical drugs that are being increased irrationally and give them the power to reduce those prices back down to an affordable level so people can afford their care. I also think your insurance should actually do something for you and cover things. And so that's why I have a bill that would mandate that insurance covers hearing aids for anybody 18 plus. That's where I stand on healthcare, and that's where I think I think the government's role is.
Thank you. And Rich.
Thank you, Mary. I've done a lot in healthcare, and I originally wasn't on the Health and Human Service Committee, and they moved me on there because I was doing so many bills on it, and worked with a bipartisan group of like-minded people that want to further the discussion on solutions for Minnesota. But we've done a lot in 4 years that we've been up there. We worked on pharmaceutical pricing. It's tough nut to crack. A lot of lawsuits. Mental health. We've done a lot on mental health. I think that's one thing we don't talk about enough. That is part of cost of care is mental health. I chief authored the bill on health on the hospital costs of common procedures, and also had the bill that will hopefully take effect this next year, which will enable us to better understand our hospital bills, the statements that come in the mail that are so hard to interpret in a timely fashion. We worked really hard on reinsurance, pharmacy benefit manager. But probably the last thing I'll talk about real quick is my bill for the right to shop. That would enable you to go outside a network, and whatever money you would save going out of network would be split between you, the patient, and the insurance company. That savings could be used for co-pay, deductible, or future premiums. So it'd be like a self-saving health account.
Okay, thank you very much. Cognizant of the time and realizing we're not going to in any way cover everything we'd like to, I'd like to switch to some of the questions coming in about environment, environmental policy and environmental practices. This question, Rich, will come to you first, and then to John, and then to Matt. The question is, how would you balance Minnesota energy policy with environmental concerns, giving specific examples for legislation?
Thank you. That's a good question, and I think that's something small business people face all the time. Is how do you do things the right way? What products do you use? What products do you recycle? You don't use products that you can't recycle if you use a large volume of them. For me, what I've done the last 4 years, when you talk environment, invasive species are both aquatic invasive species, and weeds are a big problem here in Minnesota. So that's one aspect. The other bill I had this last year was a bill to start using environmentally friendly road sealant. So we put a lot of petroleum on our roads and bike paths and parking lot, made from petroleum. And there's a product that's been used in Minnesota for 20 years that's made out of soybean oil. So it's environmentally friendly, it's cost effective, and it helps our local farmers out. And we need to find new uses for our local farmers. So I think it's that kind of bill that we really need to champion from a state standpoint. What can we do as a state to use more environmentally friendly products like that road sealant? I also had a bill for egg-based bio tires. Just think how many tires we go through every year here in Minnesota. So those are things that I actually worked on and carried the chief author. Thank you.
Thank you, Rich. John.
Mary, could I ask you to go ahead and restate the question just because I want to make sure I clearly
Sure.
understand what it is you're asking for us to answer.
Yes. How would you balance energy policy with environmental concerns, with specific examples for environmental related regulations or policies?
Okay. So I think the focus there is on how do we move in a direction where we stop pumping carbon into the environment, and I am strongly in favor of clean energy investments in the state of Minnesota. If you look at all of the global trends on energy, it is moving in the direction of clean energy options. Here in Minnesota, I would say that our biggest pollution by far, well, not by far, biggest polluter is the transportation sector. But in that area, I have great hope. If you listen to Mary Barra, the CEO for General Motors, GM is planning on selling 1 million electric vehicles a year, every year, starting in 2024. XL Energy has a plan in place to have charging stations for electric vehicles all across the state of Minnesota. They're planning for 1.5 million electric vehicles in our state alone by 2030. Hydrogen fuel cells, interestingly enough, are another option. Toyota is actually in the lead on that, in creating hydrogen fuel cell cars. I am a big believer in the forces of the market. I'm a capitalist. I'd like to see a competition between electric cars and hydrogen fuel cell cars and the infrastructure to drive it. So public policy perspective wise, you put incentives in place to create that market competition. We also have XL Energy and Great River Energy, Minnesota Power, Otter Tail Power. They're all trying to move to carbon zero by 2050. Anything we can do policy-wise to get them there quicker is a benefit to our environment. And finally, farmers, great stewards of the land. They have an opportunity to help us sequester carbon and also be part of the energy production cycle if we give them the rewards to do that.
Thank you very much. Matt.
Thanks, Mary. And I just want to thank John for exactly what he said there about how we treat and work with farmers in protecting the environment. They have every incentive to do so. And so working with them is vitally important. So I just wanted to thank John for saying that. I think the biggest battle we have in these decisions is balancing jobs versus the environment. And we should and can be cognizant and compassionate about both of them. Because if you end someone's industry, take their job, and they can't pay their bills, it's going to be really tough to get them to be passionate and care about the environment. So let's keep that balance in mind. One of the things I think we should do is move Minnesota to 100% renewable energy. I'm a co-author with many senators at the Capitol to do that by 2050. I think the sooner we are able to do that, the sooner we are able to be a leader in green and clean energy in Minnesota, the more jobs we can bring here to help that balance between jobs and the environment. I also agree with providing the electric vehicle infrastructure and incentives to farmers to do things like cover crops and water quality, those things that make sense and are a win-win.
Thank you very much. I'm trying to make a decision in light of time here. I think I will ask one last question at the moment. Matt, you go first, then Rich, then John, and then I'll see where our time is. This question is, what is the top piece of legislation you would work on that would put Minnesota as the best state to live in our country? Matt, and then Rich, and then John.
Well, I disagree with the premise of the question because Minnesota is already the greatest state to live in by far. This really is the greatest state in the union, and I'll never shy away from saying that. Now, to make it the even greaterest state in the union would be we need paid leave here. We need paid family medical leave. Coco and I were fortunate enough to be able to spend a lot of time with Poppy when she was born, and we needed that time. And I can just see, like, I want every other parent to have that time with their newborn, and I want people to be able to spend time and care for a parent or their spouse if they get sick. I just think that those are the morals and principles that Minnesota is built around, is caring for each other. And so I want people to have that. So, that'll be my top piece of legislation if I'm reelected, is to ensure that people can take care of a family member or spend time with their newborn.
Thank you. Rich?
Yeah, I think the most impactful piece of legislation that I'm currently working on is that right to shop bill for healthcare. Minnesota's been a leader in healthcare pretty much my whole life, and I think to reimagine how we pay for healthcare and what practical. I think this right to shop bill is the direction we should go. We worked hard on getting the prices of care out there, and that's been emulated across the country. A lot of the work that we have done here in Minnesota it is leading across the nation. So I think this is one example of what would work, is this right to shop bill, where you do have the option to go outside a network if it costs less than what it does in network. And then you could use that savings for future healthcare costs. And what's covered by that. Matt brought up hearing aids. I think that's a great thing that should be covered. I think eyeglasses should be covered. I think dental should be covered. But how do we do it? How do we do it moving forward is a discussion we continue to have. So thank you.
And John.
So I'm going to talk about something that's a little bit out of the box. We have in our state some of the best educated, hardest working people in this nation. We care deeply about our environment. We care deeply about one another. We want to make sure we help lift each other out of poverty for those people who need the assistance. One of the things that we don't really think too much about, and luckily we do have a pretty good environment here, is for business startups, especially in the high tech arena. And if you look at the challenges that we face, not only here in Minnesota, but nationally and around the globe, those things can be fixed if we make some significant breakthroughs in science, technology, and engineering. Why are Silicon Valley and the Triangle out in North Carolina, why don't we have something like that here for the upper Midwest based in Minnesota? So I'd like to see us establish a cutting edge research and development, testing and evaluation capability here in the state of Minnesota, attract some of the top, smartest talent around the world here to do that research, make major breakthroughs in the medical science, pharmaceuticals, in engineering, energy production, you name it. We should be at the cutting edge here in the state of Minnesota. And I think we can create the incentives out of the state legislature to create that kind of a research environment in our state, really put us on the map and make it a place where everybody wants to move, because this is where the greatest jobs in the country will be.
Thank you very much. One last lightning round question, which means you don't get 1 minute and 30 seconds. Please, in this order, John, then Matt, then Rich, give us 3 words that describe your characteristics that will make you a strong person for us in the legislature. 3 words only. John, Matt, Rich.
Ethical, thoughtful, rational.
Scrappy, relentless, effective.
Hardworking, honest, and caring.
Thank you all so much. Okay. Candidates will now have 1 minute for their closing statement to summarize your qualifications and positions. And timers, you heard that, 1 minute. Thank you. Oh, sorry. And the order is John, Rich, Matt. Thank you.
So thank you for the opportunity to speak with you today. Like Matt and Rich, at the very beginning of this race, I pledged to run a completely clean campaign and to denounce any attack ads that came against my opponents, even from my supporters. I appreciate that both Rich and Matt are on the same side with me on those 2 issues. Frankly, this forum that we have today, this is what politics is supposed to be about. The marketplace of ideas on policy, and voters get to hear what we have to say, our response to the issues, and our vision for the future. My hope is that I have demonstrated to you today that I am the right person to send to St. Paul in November, starting in January, and I want your vote. So I hope I get your vote, and I look forward to working with all of you as we make Senate District 20 a core place for great ideas here in the state of Minnesota. Thanks.
Thank you, Mary, and thanks League of Women Voters for having this and putting this on. You know, I guess for me, it's my record. You know, I've been a very active senator. I've been involved in a lot of different groups, a lot of working groups, commissions, task forces, you know, whatever it took to make Minnesota a better place for my kids and hopefully their kids. So I think that's what we have to remember, no matter what party flag we fly, is why are we there? And for me, it's for our kids. I think Matt said the same thing. You know, we're passionate about what we do, and we're going to agree and disagree, and we got to move on and work together on the next issue. But I'm really proud of my record. I'm really proud of the bills that I've carried, chief authored, and we'll continue to work hard to solve problems. A lot of them aren't real flashy, but for someone, it was a real problem. A stakeholder came in and identified a problem. We came up with some solutions and got it through. Thank you.
Also, Mary, I want to thank you for moderating. I also want to thank the League of Women Voters for having this forum. Want to thank John, want to thank Rich. I'm proud of the campaign you guys are running, the Clean campaign. Hope my opponent will join us in that pledge. Here's why you should vote for me. I'm here. I showed up. Even if you don't agree with everything I said, even if you disagree with every single thing I said today, I'm here at least telling you where I stand. And I do the same thing for you at the Capitol. And I will always fight for the underdog because I know they need someone in their corner. Again, there are forces at the Capitol that just do not care about you. And I don't need their money. I don't need their support. And so I have a free reign to say what I need to make sure that we're taking care of Minnesotans. So thank you, and I hope to earn your support.
Thanks to all three of you and everybody who's on this call or watching later. Again, I would like to remind you that the views expressed in this forum are those of the candidates, not of the League of Women Voters and its co-sponsors. Sponsorship of this forum is not an endorsement of any candidate that comes from the League of Women Voters of Northfield and Cannon Falls. And now for our formal closing, our voter education chair of the League's Voter Service Committee, Melanie Fries.
The League of Women Voters of Northfield and Cannon Falls, Academic Civic Engagement Office of St. Olaf College, Center for Community and Civic Engagement at Carleton College, and Northfield Area Chamber of Commerce would like to thank our internet audience for viewing and St. Olaf students for helping with the timing. We would especially like to thank our candidates for being part of the democratic process by running for office and being willing to serve our community. The League also researches issues important to our members and to the health of our communities. If you are interested in learning more about what we do and how you can make a difference, please visit us at lwvmn.org. Membership is open to both men and women, age 16 and older. You can find more information about candidates and voting at mnvote.org and lwvmn.org. Links to all the candidate forms and additional voter information can be found at our local website, lwvnorthfieldmn.org. Again, thank you for coming, and remember to vote.